From the dawn of time we came, moving silently among you. Immortals.
Before we address the biblical perspective on blood and its relationship to the parallel dimension, we have to address the cultural beliefs and practices that are part of our human history. The idea of vampires may be a conditioning by Lucifer through human agents to steer mankind to an ultimate prophetic end. With that said, let's look at the history of myths, legends, and pop fiction on blood and vampires. I hope to show you a progression or regression or digression that is steering mankind to an ultimate end and game delusion. Forgiveness of sin, the promise of eternal life, and a required sacrifice of an innocent death in association of blood is a primary theme in the Jewish and Christian belief system. It has been often misunderstood by those outside of the faith and even mocked by others in religion, myth, and fiction. Many pagan religions have taken the Judeo-Christian concepts and reversed them, whereby instead of God making the sacrifice for mankind, mankind sacrifices humans with the drinking of blood and the eating of human flesh to sustain immortality or pleasing and placating the desires of various godlike deities. Legends and myths of blood-drinking, flesh-eating entities associated these acts for themselves with obtaining the power of eternal life are universal. This kind of fascination about blood has been with us throughout history and has a variation in almost every culture and mankind. In ancient Egypt, the Sekhmet, a female deity, drank blood. In India, the goddess Kali had fangs, wore a necklace of human skulls, and drank blood of human sacrifices. In Asia, the Aswang are still a popular culture myth. In China, it was the Yangtze, Africa, the Impundula, South America, the Sukovjant and Tunda, and the Patalsola. In the Arabic world, some of the jinn had the same characteristics of blood-drinking practices. The oldest versions are found in ancient Babylon. A deity, Lilitu, was known for drinking the blood of babies. This deity shares the legend as possibly being that of Lilith. The ancient Aztecs offered up young victims to the Quetzalcoatl to ensure fertilization of the earth. Similar practices by the Incans and Mayans did the same for their gods. Both Greek and Roman mythology included deities with vampire characteristics and the power of human blood to create new or eternal life. Ancient names like Lemi, Impassu, and the Strigus later evolved to become the general terms for medieval European witches, demons, and vampires. Two demon types developed from this are the well-known succubus and incubus, seductive sexual blood drinkers who set the stage for the popular myths of vampires today. Voltaire's writings took these ancient myths to a new level of popular interest, and he is attributed as a turning point for inspiration for future authors. In the 1400s, Prince Vlad Tepes of Transylvania became a hero in Bavaria for pushing the Ottoman Empire from their land. He was called the Impaler for his bloodthirsty slaughter of his enemies by impaling them on poles. It's alleged that he drank the blood of his dying victims. His life was the inspiration for the most famous book by Bram Stoker, which came to print in 1897. The first actual novel about vampires came out in 1817 by John Paladin's The Vampire. In both cases, the vampires were human-like but kept the grotesque monster-like qualities and features from the ancient myths. The first Hollywood movie, A Fool Was There, portrayed the other ancient myth of the female seductive type of vampire. This movie featured silent movie actress Theda Bara as the sexy seductress. The movie was based on the first poem about vampires by the famous Rudyard Kipling and is considered the first vampire movie. The second major Hollywood work reverted back to the male, undead monster-like human in the movie classic Nosferatu. This male ghoulish seducer remained the status quo for the next several decades, with a progression of more human-like attributes, even to the point of being rather attractive enough to seduce women into their lifestyle as willing followers. But Hollywood would also add an occasional female vamp seductress just to keep the male population interested also. The TV movie Dark Shadows, a daytime soap opera, began to make the audience see a more human drama played out within the vampire lore. Females across America and Europe became fascinated with the human drama of the vampire as a greater depth and dimension to the personalities existed and was explained prior to their mishap of becoming a vampire. Suddenly a transformation was taking place that beckoned the mainstream to accept the vampire as less of a monster and more of an entity to have compassion and understanding for their unwanted plight. We still had the fearful monster types with Christopher Lee and the Bela Lugosi types, but we also had the comical grandpapa of the monsters. Vampires became diverse and acceptable. In the early 80s, with Vampire Diaries and Tom Cruise's Interview with a Vampire, the role became that of a rather handsome, sexy victim. Now the female members of society began to see a romantic fantasy regarding vampires. At the same time, we had very attractive female vampires as hosts of horror shows like Elvira, and that also kept the male population interested and filled with a desire. Something else began to evolve from this conditioning by Hollywood at the same time. A subculture started to evolve worldwide called the Goths. This subculture desires and even emulates many of the occult, hellish, and devilish practices, including the drinking of blood and believing that they are real vampires. Some aspects of this subculture intellectualize their social lifestyle as innocent entertainment or justified reality. Further digression from Hollywood has taken the whole occult topic of blood, vampires, wolfmen to the next level, from sympathy to a new realm of desire through romanticizing them. With the hit book series Twilight by Stephenie Meyer, mainstream America and families across the globe have fallen in love with the vampire characters and now become obsessed with them. The town of Forks, Washington, where the fiction story was based on, has become the new Roswell for vampires. Suddenly, June and Ward Cleaver has invited the things of death and darkness into their lives under the guise of romance, fun, and fantasy. The whole topic of vampires through the decades of the last century has progressively made society accept and even desire the vampire concept. We are now saturated by this idea just like aliens. Our children grow up from the beginning with vampires and continue on playing video role games, comics, and right into adulthood with adult graphic comics, daytime soaps, and romance novels. Recently, the Sci-Fi Channel has even combined vampires as being aliens. This has always been a theme that has been a campy, B-rate, fluffy thing of the past, but the Sci-Fi Channel has upped the ante on presenting an in-depth drama. The storyline goes that a dying planet of vampire-like aliens colonize the Earth by infiltrating and integrating themselves into human society. They are known to us as all of the famous innovators, discoverers, and also heinous criminals, having both good and evil members of their society that have infiltrated and integrated themselves into our human experience. They fight against each other, and man is kind of stuck in the middle, unknowing of the hidden history around them. This parallels so much with biblical prophetic end-time warnings that it is no coincidence. This graphic was from a Gothic website. The inclusion of such a composite iconic illustration is acknowledgement that some Goths at some level know exactly what they're into. Notice the three aspects of this illustration. We have a goat-headed human-like creature inside the pentagram and a serpent circling around the entire picture. The goat is Satan. The pentagram signifies his five-point plan mentioned in Isaiah 14 as the mystery of iniquity, also mentioned by the Apostle Paul. The Ouroboros, which is the iconic name for the serpent with his own tail in his mouth, is symbolic of Satan's ultimate goal to make this linear dimension into an eternal one. Funny how this is in association with the vampire legends in Gothic society. This Gothic culture also connects vampires with the Nephilim mentioned in the Bible. Interesting to note, in Genesis 6 we find unusual events happening with fallen angels that interbred with human women. The result was giants, or in the Hebrew, Nephilim. They were described as bullies and tyrants toward the rest of mankind and played with them unmercifully. These entities are known in history as all of the cultural tales of mythology. Yes, these creatures were real, and the myths are just a faint memory of that time. The Book of Enoch further describes this pre-flood time and the society that existed then. Some of these Nephilim began to kill and eat humans or drink their blood. What is even more important is to realize that Jesus said about this time, just as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man. In context, Jesus was describing events that would lead up to his second appearance at the end of time. Vampires and the biblical Nephilim have the same characteristics and are probably one and the same and soon to return as warned. But wait, there's more. Some are already here and have been here throughout time as immortals, coexisting with human society, steering it towards a one-world religion, government, and monetary system. Let's look at this text in Jude. These are they who were of old. These are spots in your feast of charity, when they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear. Clouds are they without water, carried about of winds, trees whose fruit withereth, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots, raging waves of the sea, foaming out of their own shame, wandering stars to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. Clouds without water, twice dead, wandering stars, reserved for everlasting darkness are three descriptions of fallen angels, not humans. Understanding this connection, you can see why the promotional campaign evolved throughout our history is about to come to completion. Human society is being made ready to accept these entities as beneficent aliens come to help mankind at our darkest hour. You see many embrace the weird, macabre culture of the Goths who already know this and the unsuspected masses who blindly embrace a romantic fantasy soon to become all of our reality. Next we will learn what the Bible has to say about the power of blood.
God.